My name's Cletus, and you're on the red list. Today I want to talk to you about what I refer to as the WROL Continuum. WROL is a term or an acronym that people throw around quite a bit here on YouTube. To my best of my knowledge, a YouTuber, Nothing Fancy, coined the phrase WROL, without rule of law. It's something that we've come to understand would be a situation where if we were in a Katrina type situation, you'd be in a situation where essential services broke down. There wouldn't necessarily be law enforcement protection. You wouldn't have necessarily have power, things like that. And a lot of people automatically take that to the absolute worst. That when people use WROL, that we're talking about the apocalypse, the end of everything as we know it. And what I want to do is I want to bring about a little bit different take on what WROL means. Without rule of law, when the police officers, if you're familiar with law enforcement at all, law enforcement officers, they have what they call a force continuum. And basically what that means is you don't automatically apply the same amount of force to get a result in a particular situation. There's some situations that do mean you need to draw your gun and shoot at a bad guy. There are other situations that can be solved just by your presence. So on the force continuum for law enforcement, if you have a situation where you've got a bad actor, you've got somebody that's not doing what they're supposed to do, the first step in the force continuum would be to just observe that person from a hide or from where you can't be seen. And maybe just by observing that person, you can head off whatever their intentions are. The next step in that force continuum would be to observe that person from a known scene location. Just a law enforcement presence in many situations is enough force to deter that criminal. Now, I'm using the word force. Again, it's a little ambiguous. You're not physically doing anything. You're not even speaking to that individual, but just a show of force, just the law enforcement presence is the next step on that force continuum. The next step obviously would be engaging the suspect, speaking to the person, talking to the person, and then you would continue all the way down to when you got into situations where you may use a less than lethal force. You may use a stun gun or a taser or a beanbag round, all the way to the situation where you would possibly have to draw your weapon and shoot at a suspect. Now, obviously, police officers don't want to do that. They don't live for that. No decent police officer does. Well, I want to apply that continuum idea to WROL. And when we start talking about WROL, a lot of people assume we're talking about rule of law, meaning man's law, meaning the police, the laws that are on the books in your state. And we are talking about that, but we're also talking about other laws, natural laws. There's a law of gravity. There's a law of averages. There are a lot of laws that, to some degree, govern our everyday life. There's a law of normalcy. Things tomorrow, most likely, are going to be as normal as they were yesterday in your life. That's a law of normalcy, and that exists. So when we're talking about a without rule of law situation, we need to look at it as a continuum, a without rule of law continuum, where we can go from 0 to 10. And 0 would be a normal average day. Today, for me, is a 0. All the way until you're in a long-term survival situation, like if an EMP were to be exploded over the United States, which is a real possibility. That would be a 10 in a without rule of law situation. Everything would be broken down. There would be no essential services. There would be no power. There would be no sewage. There would be no water. There would be no communications. There would be no radios. There would be no walkie-talkies. There would be nothing. You would be on your own. That would be a 10. So what you have to decide for yourself is each one of those steps. If today is a 0 for you, what would be a 1 on a WROL continuum? Anything out of the ordinary might put you into a 1. What would put you into a 2? What would put you into a 3? What would put you into a 4? What would put you into a 5? And what we need to do is, instead of just getting totally freaked out about what the worst case scenario, because you can't plan immediately for the worst case scenario. Certainly if you're just now getting started with your preps. But even if you've been prepping for a while, you may not be ready for a 10. And let's face it, most of us aren't. But you need to look at it, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. You need to figure out in your scenario where you live, what part of the country you live in, what the weather is like, what time of the year is it right now, how cold is it for you. There are things that would be a 1 in the life of somebody who lived in rural South Florida. If you live in Pasco County, Florida, for instance, something that would be a 1 to you might be a 4 or a 5 or a 6 to somebody who lives in Buffalo, New York, just simply because of the weather. So something that would be a 3 or a 4 for that guy that's in Canada. For a guy that's in West Texas, might be a 2. You just have to look at your situation. But instead of looking at it as an all-out, balls to the wall, emergency, long-term Katrina type situation, and oh my Lord, there's no way I can prepare for this, think about WROL as a WROL continuum. What is a 1? What is a 2? What am I going to do at a 1? What am I going to do at a 2? Sit down with your family, sit down with your spouse, sit down with the people in your group that you're going to depend on. What are we going to consider a 5? At what point are we going to say, okay, this is something that's actionable? In my life, I would say a 1 or a 2 or a 3 are really probably not actionable. They are little bitty things that could go wrong. A serious weather event. If you had for me, where I live, you could have a hurricane. And a hurricane might put you, just a hurricane warning might take you from a 0 to a 1, but it's really not actionable at that point. You're just going to sit back, you're going to watch the weather, you're going to follow it, you're going to see what's going on. We just had a situation in October, I've mentioned this before, where I think we had about 4 million people without power, some of them without power for 11 days in the Northeast in freezing temperatures in a winter storm. So that obviously is not a 1. But when you know that nor'easter's coming, that's a 1. When it looks like it's going to hit your area, or a hurricane, if it's just a hurricane watch, that's a 1. If it's a hurricane warning, that might be a 2. If the hurricane's getting closer, if the hurricane's going to definitely hit close to you, then what are we going to do at each one of these steps? There has to come a time. Everybody's talking bug out bag, bug out bag, bug out bag. Well, having to deal with hurricanes, bugging out is something that we deal with every year. If there's a serious storm, we have to decide, okay, at what point are we going to say we got to leave? Because there comes a point it's too late to leave. And that would happen in a WROL situation. At what point on our WROL continuum are we going to say, okay, it's time for us to hit the road? Because once you get to that point, you have to be ready and you have to leave. And if you don't leave, then you have to forget leaving. And that's how we are here in a hurricane. If we're going to leave and we're going to get out, we have to decide if it's a category 3 and it's going to make landfall between city A and city B, then we're going to leave. And everybody agrees upon that. And then if that storm falls into that category, then we leave. If it doesn't, then we stay. Now, does that mean the storm can't change direction or can't surprise us at the last moment? That does happen sometimes with a storm. So if we choose not to leave and then the storm falls into that parameter where we should have left, but the time window has closed, then we can't leave. And we need to know that ahead of time. So now what might have been a WROL 2 had we left, now might become, on the WROL continuum, now it might be a 4. So what do we need to do to take action to be prepared? I don't want to be an alarmist, and I don't want to scare people, and I don't want to freak people out. I want to be prepared personally, and I want as many people in this country prepared as possible, because those are the people that I'm going to have to compete with for life. There were some things issued today I'm going to make a video on in the future where there are some real credible threats for an EMP, electromagnetic pulse. And if that happens, and this was on the news today, not making this up, there's a professional who's done the reports, who's done the research, that said a major EMP, there's 360 million people in the U.S., and if we had an EMP, that maybe 2/3 of the people in the U.S. would perish. They'd die. Now that's serious. So the more of you who are prepared to deal with a situation like that, the less stress that's going to put on me. Think about the people who were in Katrina. If just 20% of those people were preppers and had been prepared for what happened to that city, and they were left in that city, they would have made a huge difference. Now, what if that was 30% or 40%? I don't want to freak people out. I don't want you to think that you can't handle these situations, because you can. We're Americans. That's what makes America great, is me and you and the people in your group, the people that you know. That's what makes America great. You and I can do this. You and I can solve any problem that comes down the pipe. We just need to be prepared. I want you to think about the WROL Continuum concept. If you like it, please use it. If you don't like it, please let me know where I'm flawed. Post a video response. Do anything that you'd like. If you're new to my channel, if you will, please take a moment, and if you'll click right up here, you can subscribe to this channel. There's going to be a lot of videos coming from me and other people that are going to be along this line. Subscribe if you have a YouTube account. If you don't have a YouTube account, it's free to sign up for YouTube. All you need is an email account. If you have a Gmail account, Gmail and YouTube are now married, so you automatically have a YouTube account. So if you just stumbled on this video and you like what we're talking about here, and you like this channel, subscribe. There's going to be a lot of useful information put out, and it's going to be a good information exchange. It's not going to be just me talking to a camera and you listening. I want to hear back from you. I want to hear where I'm flawed. I want to know where you can help me be more prepared. I really appreciate your time. I truly appreciate your time. I thank you for watching the video. My name's Cletus, and for the past few minutes, you've been on the red list.